Welcome back to part 2 of our rust removal series of this Mini 14 that we've been working on. In our last video yesterday, we showed polishing this gun and how to get it into this state where it's ready for final bluing. So let's get started. So this process uses some pretty hazardous chemicals to the touch. It's important that before you attempt to do this yourself that you read all the available information on it. Brownells has some great information on the bluing process and how to use their Oxynite number 7, which is what we'll be using today. This video is really just intended to show you how we do it in the shop, not necessarily a tutorial for how you can do it yourself. There's plenty of videos out there for that, and Brownells does a great job of explaining step by step as well. Or better yet, send your firearms to us and we'll take care of them for you. Alright, so what I'm doing here is just getting cleaned up, cleaning out my cold water rinse tank, and prepping the area for my parts. And currently we've got the burners on and our caustic acid tank is warming up. So this is a basic 4-tank setup. We have a cold water tank, a hot water tank, and a caustic acid tank. We use Brownells Oxynite number 7. I have mixed my own chemicals in the past, or bluing salts. When it's available, Oxynite number 7 is a pretty easy alternative. As it heats up, the crystallized salts on the top, they'll dissolve and melt into the tank. Our hot water tank is used to warm up our bluing after it goes into the cold water bath before we put it in the oil bath. And this is our oil bath, which is water displacing oil, and that's used to push the water out of the pores of the metal and to let oil be able to entrap back into it as the gun cools down. While my tanks are heating up, I'm cleaning all my parts off with denatured alcohol, and it's also important to make sure you're stirring your bluing salts, because when they cool down they solidify, and when they warm up, if you don't break those salts up and then they break apart all at one time, it can cause an eruption in your tank. Our parts are all now cleaned and hung and ready to go into our tank. We are currently at right around 170 degrees. We want it to ideally be around 186 to 188 as we put the parts in and starting to get into a rolling boil. Make sure you look up and follow your manufacturer's recommendations for the proper PPE to use for the chemicals that you're using. I use different PPE at different stages. I guess to sum it up, the disclaimer is use the manufacturer's recommendations, not necessarily what you see me doing. When the bluing salts start to heat up, they dissolve. When they do that, you get this foam to some degree on top of the tank. That's something that will skim. You need to stay on top of that as you warm your tanks up, otherwise it can create a foam layer and it can also erupt. You'll notice I upgraded my PPE as the tanks get warm and you start doing more work in with the caustic. It's better to make sure that you are covered so you don't get any burns from it. And it does burn. You can't really see it in the video, but I do also have a large exhaust fan above the tanks.
Hi Rosie, how are you? Arr?
So our tank's reached about 287 degrees and has a rolling boil. We've put some parts in, and at this point we're going to let it come up to that sweet spot between 292 and 298, and then we'll take the parts out and we'll put them in the cold water. You do not want to ever go from the hot salts into the hot water. Trust me. Once we put them in the cold water, they're okay to inspect and to look at, and sometimes you can correct some issues at that point if you need to. Once we inspect it, you can always go back into the hot bluing tank from the cold water tank and see if you can get a darker color.
So at this point, the parts are safe to look at. And this is when you do an inspection. Make sure everything looks right. If you see any blemishes or bad spots, oftentimes you can rub it with a little triple-aught steel wool, put it back in the hot bluing tanks, and it will fix the problem. That one looks great. So you want to make sure you do a thorough inspection. Everything looks really good to me. That barrel looks great. I don't see any oil spots that would have ran from any screw holes or anything like that. That turned out nice. One thing I did notice, our bolt was stainless steel, so they had some type of a coating on it. Stainless requires a different bluing process, so I'll talk to my customer on this one. There's a few options. You can Cerakote it, or you can get a special Brownell's high temperature bluing for stainless. A lot of people like the dual tone anyway. That turned out great too. The only other thing we have over there are our screws. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take the lid off our hot water tank. We're going to put them in our hot water tank for 5-6 minutes, just enough so they get hot and it will flash off some of the water between going from here back into the oil tank. And what that does is as the metal heats up, it opens the pores, and when you put it in the water displacing oil, it closes those pores up and it fills them with lubricant instead of just water. And then after that, we'll coat them all in rig, rust inhibiting grease. I like to do that while it's still hot so it melts into those pores as well. And that'll complete the process. Alright, so next morning, as you can see, it's still covered in rig. Stuff's kind of neat, it kind of melts in. So, we're going to reassemble this gun and get it ready for the customer.